Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name is Madison Tesh, and I am working with NCWF as a conservation coordinator. And I just wanted to give you all a chance to look at my coastal North Carolina pollinators and gardening for wildlife presentation. And I really hope you enjoy it. So just to give a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about in this presentation, I'm going to go over some characteristics of gardening on the coastal plain, and then some challenges that come with gardening on the coastal plain. I put together a little snippet of plants that would be good for the coast, and then also some garden examples and some advice. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to forward them to me. Okay, so what are some characteristics of the coastal plain? They're in a hardiness zone of 8B to 7A, which means that the average minimum temperatures can get between 0 degrees Fahrenheit and 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So why that's important is that you want to make sure that you're choosing plants that can withstand temperatures down to that degree. The soil type on the coastal plain is typically a sandhill soil where it's sandy and gray and loamy. And oftentimes, this soil can contain a lot of salt, especially if you're closer to the ocean and you can get a lot of salt and sea spray. So that presents some of challenges of gardening on the coast, is that the salt can be an issue, as well as the sand and frequent flooding, especially from hurricanes and larger storms. So the big question is, what plants are good for a coastal landscape? All of the plants that I've included are either tolerant of salt, sand, flooding conditions, or a combination of those characteristics. I also tried to include a variety of plants ranging from woody to herbaceous plants, lots of different sizes and colors to help you create a very diverse and wildlife-friendly garden. Okay, so I'm going to start with a few of the live oak trees, a few of the larger trees, including the live oak tree. So this is an evergreen large tree, meaning that it's going to keep its leaves year-round, even through the winter. It can reach a height of 40 to 80 feet tall, and it's best planted in full sun. It is a slow-growing plant, so when you first plant it, it may look more like the image here on the left, but once it grows, it could reach a canopy size that's more characteristic of the picture on the right. So when you're placing this tree, you want to keep in mind that the canopy is going to get very large. But it has several different wildlife characteristics. It provides nesting and cover for birds and small mammals, especially in the winter when most other trees don't have their leaves. It provides acorns for food for wildlife, and that's produced annually. It also will attract butterflies. It's the host plant for the Horace's dusky wing, which is this image on the left, the white M hairstreak, and the northern hairstreak. So a variety of butterflies actually feed on this tree as well. Here we have the wax myrtle. This is also an evergreen multi-stem tree. It doesn't reach as high. It reaches a height of 10 to 15 feet tall. It likes full sun to part shade, and you do need to plant a male and a female plant in order for the female plant to produce berries. But it's a great plant for the coastal plain because once it's established, it'll be drought, salt, and flood tolerant. It has a variety of wildlife characteristics. The berries that it produces, which are shown here along this stem, are eaten by the yellow runt warbler. And it's also the host plant for the red-banded hairstreak, which is this really unique butterfly here. The flowers that it produces are a great nectar source for bees and butterflies, ensuring that pollinators will be attracted to your garden. Here we have the pawpaw tree. This is a very commonly known tree here in North Carolina, typically known for being the host plant for the zebra swallowtail, which is this black and white butterfly on the bottom here. And this is an understory deciduous tree. It reaches a height of 15 to 30 feet tall. It likes full sun to part shade, and is tolerant of those sandy soils that are very typical on the coast. It produces a nice edible fruit, and I've had it before. It's more like a custard flavor, and so it's very interesting, but it is an edible fruit, which is very cool for a North Carolina tree, native tree. And so it produces fruit that attracts songbirds and mammals, and again, it's the host plant for the zebra swallowtail and the pawpaw sphinx moth. Here we have the Sabal Palm. And this is a tall perennial tree that reaches a height of 30 to 70 feet tall. It likes full sun to part shade. It produces a nice sweet fragrance when it's blooming, and the fruit is actually edible to the gardener as well. This plant is also very salt tolerant, so perfect for more gardens that are closer to the ocean. The fruit is food for songbirds, squirrels, bobwhites, bears, deer, turkey, all sorts of wildlife. So it's a very well-liked fruit. If you don't want the tallness of that Sabal Palmetto, there's also the Dwarf Palmetto. So this actually reaches a height of 4 to 6 feet tall. So you can still get that feel of the palms in your garden aesthetic, but just not so high of a tree. It likes full sun, part shade, and it prefers more moist soil, especially during its establishment. But once it is established, it's drought tolerant, and the fronds may get a little bit of browning on the ends, but that's very typical during a drought. It provides the fruit will attract birds and mammals, including robins and woodpeckers. The nectar also produced is very attractive to insects and other pollinators. Here we have beautyberry. This is a deciduous shrub reaching a height of 3 to 6 feet tall. It likes full sun to part shade, and it can handle brief flooding. So when I say brief flooding, that typically means that the soil drains within 1 to 3 days. So this is a very good plant for rain gardens or any other types of moist soil where it can frequently flood during rainstorms. But it's a great food source for a variety of songbirds. It produces this really beautiful purple berry in clusters along the stems that you can see here in this image. Just several different several clusters of these berries. The berries can attract possums and other small mammals, including birds. And the flowers will attract butterflies and bees as well. Here we have the cinnamon fern. This is one of my favorite ferns. It has a very nice erect habit shape to it with the fronds kind of arching outwards. It's a nice herbaceous perennial reaching a height of 2 to 3 feet tall. It likes part shade to full shade, and it does prefer a more moist soil. But it creates this very nice cinnamon-colored spore-bearing frond, which is seen here in the middle of the plant, and that's usually produced in the spring. Last year, I witnessed it blooming around April, so it's produced in early spring. But it provides cover to small mammals and amphibians, and the fuzz from the fiddleheads is actually a favorite nesting material by birds. Here we have the curly leaf yucca. This is a very interesting plant because it has these little filaments that kind of curl off the leaves, giving it its name. But it's a broadleaf evergreen reaching a height of 4 to 8 feet tall. It likes full sun, and it prefers a more drier soil, or at least a well-draining soil. And it's actually very tolerant of pollution. I typically see this plant planted in ditches or along roadsides where pollution levels can be a little bit higher. So this is a good plant to include in that area. But the flowers will attract butterflies and bees, and it has this very nice like bell-shaped flower, which is also attractive to hummingbirds. And it's actually solely pollinated by the yucca moth. It has a very interesting relationship there, where the yucca moth will lay its eggs inside the flower and then deliberately move pollen to the stamen, thus pollinating that flower. So it's a very interesting relationship there. Very good plant. Here we have the yellow passion flower. This is one of my favorite vines. I think it's just really cute, but it's a herbaceous perennial vine reaching a height of 8 to 12 feet tall. It likes full sun to part shade and is deer resistant. It emerges in late spring and it blooms later in the summer, and it produces these black blue berries. And it's actually the only known food source for the passion flower bee, which unfortunately this is the best image that I could find of it, but this bee solely feeds the pollen of this flower to its young. But it's a great nectar source for other pollinators. It doesn't only attract this bee, but is attractive to other bees and pollinators as well. Again, it produces fruit that will attract birds and small mammals, and it's a larval host plant for the Gulf fritillary butterfly, which is this really beautiful orange butterfly up top. Here we have the crossvine. This is an evergreen woody vine reaching a height of 35 to 50 feet tall. It likes full sun to part shade, and it flowers best with the more sunlight that it receives. It does tolerate brief flooding as well, so good for those moist soils where storms may have brief areas of flooding. But it's pollinated by the ruby-throated hummingbird, which is actually our only breeding hummingbird in North Carolina. It's also the early nectar source for bees and butterflies. I've seen bees just going straight into the flower, digging really deep and coming out covered in pollen. So it's really good nectar source for bees and butterflies, and it's the host plant for the sphinx moth. Here we have the prickly pear. This is a perennial cactus reaching a height of 0 to 1 feet tall, so it's a very low growing plant. It likes full sun and it's salt tolerant. It needs nice, well-draining soil, so it's perfect for if you're closer to the coast and maybe you have tourists that are coming around your house and you want to plant some sort of barrier. This is a really great low-growing plant for that. It attracts long-tongue and short-tongue bees, so a nice diversity of pollinators. The fruit and seed attract birds and small mammals. And it's also a potential nesting site for bobwhite if you're near populations of bobwhite. Why they choose to nest in cactuses, I'm not sure, but it is a potential nesting site for them. And it's also the larval host plant for the eastern cactus boring moth. And it produces these nice yellow flowers in the spring, and then again the fruit is this nice pink color, pink fruit up on the tops of the pads. Here we have butterfly milkweed. This is a herbaceous perennial reaching a height of 1 to 3 feet tall, and it likes full sun and moist soils, and it blooms in the summer. This is a pretty commonly known plant because it is the larval food source for the monarch butterfly. But it's also a great pollinator and nectar source for other pollinators, including butterflies and other beneficial insects like bees or beetles. Here we have the coastal pepperbush. This is one of my favorite plants. The first time I saw this plant, I was working on Fort Bragg, and it was just a pollinator magnet. So many bees and wasps and beetles were just swarming in the clusters of flowers. And this is a deciduous shrub. The shrub can reach around 3 to 8 feet tall and it likes full sun to part shade. I actually have seen it planted in full shade and it seems to still flower, so it is tolerant of full shade areas as well. It produces a really nice great fall color, which is what you see in this image, is this nice yellow fall color. And it's salt and sand tolerant, so really good for coastal landscaping. It produces these nice fragrant flowers that form brown seed pods that are seen in this image, which are really attractive in the fall for other animals to go and eat the seeds. It attracts native bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. Again, it's just a pollinator magnet. And mammals and birds will eat the fruit in the fall as well. Here we have the blanket flower. This is an annual herbaceous plant, really popular on the coast. I typically see this planted on sand dunes, especially towards public beach accesses and other areas as well. But it reaches a height of 1 to 2 feet tall and it likes full sun. It's a summer blooming plant and it's salt tolerant, but it does need some really good drainage, so good for sandier soils. But it's attractive to butterflies and to native bees. It's a host plant to several different species of moths, and the seeds in the fall will attract goldfinches as well. Here we have the Seaside Goldenrod. This is a herbaceous perennial reaching a height of 3 to 6 feet tall. It likes full sun. It is a late flowering plant with these nice yellow flowers. It's drought and salt tolerant, and it's often used in erosion control because it has a very nice fibrous root system. It provides nectar for migrating monarchs in the fall because it does bloom much later than other flowers. And it's a great overwintering site for gall-producing insects, which then in turn provide food for other wildlife during the winter. It also can be a nice nesting site for birds as well. Here we have the blazing star. This is a herbaceous perennial reaching a height of 2 to 4 feet tall. It likes full sun and it creates this nice spike flower in the summer. You can see just the purple clusters. That's all flowers just up in the spike. It attracts hummingbirds and butterflies, and it has a special value to native bees. Native bees love this plant. The birds will eat the seeds in the fall, and it's the host plant for the rare glorious flower moth. I don't know of if its range reaches into North Carolina, but it is present in some parts of Florida and Georgia. But that is the host plant for the glorious flower moth as well. Sea oats is one of my favorite plants. This is a clumping perennial with drooping panicles of seeds. It reaches a height of 2 to 5 feet tall, and it likes full sun to part shade, though it can tolerate a little bit more heavier shade. It's often used in erosion control because of its nice fibrous root systems. It can reseed aggressively, and it may need some management, maybe by cutting off some of the seed pods before they develop. But it has these really nice drooping seed pods, which can be very attractive in the winter. But the seed is a food source for birds and small mammals, and it provides cover for birds and other small wildlife. It's also the host plant for the northern pearly eye and some skippers, skippers being just another type of butterfly. But this is the northern pearly eye here, and this is actually a really cool woodland butterfly that prefers more of a shadier site. So if you want to make habitat that's more catering towards this butterfly, then maybe planting it in a shadier site would be beneficial. Here we have the broadleaf white-top sedge. This is a herbaceous perennial reaching a height of 3 to 6 feet tall. It likes full sun to part shade and has a very stunning white flower top on top of the sedge. It's got these nice thin leaves that provide a nice visual texture as well in the garden. It's really good for a bog garden or a rain garden. It attracts birds, butterflies, and small mammals, and it's pollinated by bees. And again, it's good in pollinator gardens, rain gardens, and wetland gardens. It's a really good plant for a variety of different ones. Here we have the split-beard bluestem. This is a perennial grass. It reaches a height of 1 to 4 feet tall, and it likes full sun to part shade. It produces these nice silvery white fruit in the fall, which you can see just lit up here in the sun. And it's a really good prairie grass. So if you're creating a meadow garden or a prairie garden, this would be a really good plant to include to help create that feeling. It's a good nesting material for birds and for bees. The seeds will attract small mammals and birds, and it's a host plant for the common wood nymph butterflies and a variety of skippers. And so this is a wood nymph butterfly here. I haven't pictured any skippers, but skippers are, again, another butterfly. Okay, so this is Seaside Little Bluestem. This is a herbaceous perennial reaching a height of 1 to 5 feet tall. It likes full sun. It's often used in erosion control, and it's very drought and poor soil tolerant. It blooms in late summer, but it's a great plant providing cover for ground birds and other small mammals and nesting material for bees and birds. And it's actually the host plant for the endangered crystal skipper. So this is a skipper here, and this is a very local butterfly to North Carolina's coast. And it's endangered, and its populations are mainly declining because of habitat loss. So including this plant in your garden, especially if you're near the coastline or on the Outer Banks, this would be a really great plant to include in your garden to hopefully you can see the butterfly that's endangered, but also to help increase host plant abundance to help the population rebound. Okay, so that's all the plants that I have for you right now, but I wanted to go into a few examples of coastal gardening and coastal landscaping. So when I think of the coast, I automatically think of beaches and diverse marshlands and boardwalks. But unfortunately, when we go closer to the residential landscapes, they look a little bit more like this. So there's a lot of empty mulch beds here, just very scarce plantings. And then the turf grass just looks like it's not doing very well. Whereas on this picture, this turf grass looks like it's doing well, but that's because it's actually a fake turf grass made out of plastic, which is just not going to provide anything for wildlife. And so I thought that this image summed it up pretty well. Turf grass lawns are a very unsustainable practice right now, and so we want to try and move away from turf grass and look at more diverse landscaping, because turf grass just isn't going to work for some parts of North Carolina, especially on the coast where sand and salt are a persistent challenge. And so I want to encourage you to look to your natural landscapes. So this is the inspiration for your garden. These diverse marshlands and dune landscapes. Or if you're more inland, maybe this is your inspiration, where there's a diverse understory and a longleaf pine forest. So we want to look at recreating this natural landscape into our yard to help benefit the native wildlife that's around us. So I thought this was a really good image. We have the butterfly milkweed here and the liatris and a few other perennials that we didn't get to talk about today. But this is a nice diverse landscape here that's providing a lot more to wildlife than what turf grass would. Here's another really good image where there's a diverse perennial bed with lots of repetition of different plants and colors, making it look very appealing. But it's also just a nice perennial bed providing cover and nectar and pollen for other wildlife. And they've severely reduced the amount of turf grass that's in this area. They've extended their perennial beds and reduced the turf grass just so that it's a nice path through the garden. So this is a really good example of a diverse perennial bed that's going to provide a lot more to wildlife than if this whole landscape were turf grass. Here's another example that's not including turf grass at all. Instead, they use a lot more of a rocky material to help create this beach landscape. And I thought that was very attractive and appealing and also very good for wildlife. Here are some more examples of a diverse perennial bed. They've reduced their turf grass here, but included a bench so that they can still go out and enjoy their garden, which is really important as well. And then they've included all these nice flowering plants that provide nectar and pollen, again, to those pollinators that really need it. And so this is an article that I read and found on the National Wildlife Federation website that I encourage you to read. It's a very interesting article talking about why lawns are unsustainable. And I really liked the image that they used where there's turf grass here towards the bottom of the lawn, but it quickly begins to intermingle with a very diverse perennial bed. And so it shows that nice contrast between what the perennial bed has to offer versus what turf grass does. And you can see in the background that their neighbor has also included a nice perennial bed, and that's just helping create a nice corridor so that pollinators don't have to move very far before they have another resource for them to go off of. Here is a nice meadow garden feel that I wanted to include. It's also diverse, but very natural looking and very well kept. So it's a very pretty landscape garden as well, and just adds to a little bit more diversity than what turf grass would. And it just shows the options that you have in creating gardens. You can make them however you want to and however you see fit for your landscape. So if you want to hold on to turf grass and keep that low grassy look, there are alternatives. So alternative lawns is the idea of using native grasses and sedges to help create better wildlife, but also reduce the harmful effects of turf grass. So if you have normal turf grass, you're typically mowing it very often, watering it often, and fertilizing it often. You may even try and use pesticides too. But with alternative lawns, these native sedges and grasses, they only need to be mowed once established, like once a year. They don't need as much water, fertilizer, or pesticides at all. And it's going to help increase the drainage and the soil aeration of the soil in your yard. You won't have to mow it as often. It's going to increase the soil structure. And again, it's going to be a less need for watering and for fertilizer. Here are a few native alternative lawn plants that I got from Hoffman Nurseries, and I just want to remind you to check before you buy anything and make sure that the plant is going to be compatible with the soil type that you have and the conditions that you have in your garden. But this is just another example of a nice alternative lawn that has a very soft look in it, but is a very beautiful soft grassy texture that, again, is going to be much more beneficial than if it was turf grass. Okay, so how to make these changes? Trying to dig up turf grass and replace turf grass can present a very daunting challenge. So I encourage you to first plan ahead and brainstorm what changes you want to make. Maybe draw a visual design, something simple, just to put your thoughts and ideas onto paper and help organize them. The next thing you want to do is plant plants in the appropriate seasons and then create a wish list of what plants you want. You want to check the availability with what nurseries are around you and the seasonality. If you try plants in the summer, such as trees, they might not be successful. And so you want to make sure that you're planting plants in the correct season to increase their chance of establishing and being successful, and just to make sure that your time and money is being well spent. And it can be a very tedious task, so I encourage you to be patient in this. In the long run, it's going to pay off. Start small, start with small sections of change, maybe increasing your perennial bed by a foot, or as things die, replace them with something native. And involve your neighbors, family, and friends. By involving our neighbors and family and friends, we're creating these nice habitat corridors that are allowing wildlife to go between these different pockets of resources and thus sustaining their populations. And there's several different certified wildlife habitats all across North America, or the United States, that is. So I encourage you to try and get your landscape certified as well. And one way that you can do that, or one way that you can encourage your neighbors and family and friends, is to help educate them using signs. And so here are two different signs that we have available. The first one here is the Butterfly Highway sign. And this is a North Carolina Wildlife Federation program. It's a statewide conservation initiative that's helping to create a network of native flowering plants all across North Carolina. And so that's the sign for that program. And then there's also the Certified Wildlife Habitat sign, which is through the National Wildlife Federation. But you can find the application for this program on our website, which I'll give shortly. But you basically fill out the application and tell us if you provide cover, food, shelter, places to raise young using sustainable practices. And once you fill out the application, then you can apply for the sign as well. So the Butterfly Highway sign is $35 and the Certified Wildlife Habitat sign is $30. And once you order it, we'll send it to you, and the next thing you'll need are just 2 screws and a post to add it into your garden and to help spread awareness of the need for pollinators and pollinator gardening. If you need plants and you're on the coast, here are a few native plant nurseries that, along with the following county that they are in. But I also included Hoffman Nursery here in Durham County in the Piedmont, but I wanted to include it because it has really good alternative lawn examples if you're more curious about that and want to check that out. If you're on the coast, I encourage you to join a coastal chapter. There's one in Washington, New Bern, and Elizabeth City. If there's not one in your area, though, I would love for you to reach out to me or Tara and let us know. We would love to help you start a chapter in your area. Here is our contact information. I'm on the left and Tara's on the right. Feel free to email us with any questions you have about pollinator gardening or joining a chapter. And if you want to check out more information, our website is ncwf.org, and I encourage you to check that out as well. But other than that, thank you for joining, and please email me if you have any other questions.